Great. Okay, ready? 3, 2, 1. And we're live.
Welcome to another Reiki Cafe coffee conversation. I'm joined with Isabel Wells here on this YouTube live stream. I'm super excited to join with you guys this morning. Let us know what you're drinking, where you're watching from. I'd love to know all of the things. I know that a few of you were waiting, ready to go to join with us this morning. So let us know.
Super excited to be with you guys today. I am just drinking water today, but I do have my fancy cup, so makes it a little more spicy this morning. But Christine, what are you drinking? Is today a coffee day for you?
Today is a coffee day for me, but I'm having an Americano with coconut milk and a splash of salted caramel syrup.
Oh, okay. I'm just like water, and you're like, I made myself this latte with all this special syrup.
I've been spoiling myself lately because I got on the whole turmeric latte bandwagon again. And so I've had that like every day this week, but part of it's because I've been feeling a little headachy, backachy thing. So I'm like, all right, we're gonna hit the turmeric hard, and ran out of oat milk. So we're on to coconut milk. Coconut milk and turmeric, then it just ends up tasting like curry. So that's not a good mix. Not for a hot beverage.
Yeah, I was really big into, I think they're called golden milk lattes for a while. I loved those. And lately I've been doing, when I wake up in the morning, I make a matcha. So I've had my matcha for this morning, hence the water in the fancy cup.
I love it.
And my cat, apparently. Hello.
She's like, I'll join you.
Yeah.
Welcome. I see a few people have joined us, and let us know where you're watching from the chat. Fantastic. Welcome, New Hampshire and Oregon. If you don't know, I'm over in Bozeman, Montana. We still have at least a foot of snow out, and everything is still very much frozen. It's 15 degrees Fahrenheit outside, and I am ready to see at least something green. We don't have a blade of grass that's green, or not a blossom on a tree, not a single green leaf anywhere to be found in our city. So while everyone is enjoying their spring break, Montanans are still trying to escape the state to see something green.
Yeah, I'm in Knoxville, Tennessee, and we're having an unexpected heat wave. Like, it's been in the 70s the last couple days, and now I'm a crazy person who absolutely adores the cold, which is why I'm moving to Alaska this fall. But I'm over here like, why is it 70 degrees in March? This is not okay. So Christina and I just need to trade. You just need to come here. I'll go to Bozeman. It'll be great.
I think I overall love living in Montana. I enjoy the cold, but it gets to a point where it's like, okay, enough already. Like, we've had negative degree weather and freezing temperatures for months now. Can we get a break? Just a little break. So and pivoting on that note, today's coffee conversation, we are going to be talking about our inner child, how to work with our inner child, how to heal our inner child, and what does that mean for our limiting beliefs. And so this is a conversation I love having, because I feel like everyone has work to do here. It doesn't matter who you are or how traumatic your childhood was. Everyone has childhood wounds of some capacity that fed us on the subconscious level, that really has led into limiting beliefs and patterns in our life. And so that's what we're going to get into today.
Absolutely. I'm really excited for this conversation, because I think one of the big questions that we're going to be answering is, how are our limiting beliefs impacting and impacted by our inner child? Because these are really important questions, especially when we start to really dissect what a limiting belief is and why we have them and how they impact us when we're adults and what we can do to heal them. So I'm super excited for today's conversation. It's going to be a good one. Let us know in the chat if you've done your inner child healing, if you're currently working on inner child healing, what experience do you have in this realm? and we'll go ahead and dive in.
Yeah. So I gotta preface this with, I was introduced to inner child healing work through my own therapist many, many years ago. So this is something that as you explore, if you decide that you want to work with someone, be sure you're working with a trauma-informed coach or a trauma-informed therapist, as this can bring up things from your past. And as Reiki practitioners, our job is to keep things safe and to really focus on moving forward in the future. And so as you are feeling things come up, recognize that this is a great way to start journaling out those thoughts and emotions that are coming to the surface, and know that the idea here from our Reiki coaching supported perspective is that we're helping bring the past to the present, not bringing the present to who you are today and necessarily going back into the past, unless you have someone guiding you and supporting you to do that.
Yeah, and that's such a big disclaimer when we're starting to do inner child work, because part of this is understanding that, as Reiki practitioners, we want to serve the best and highest good for ourselves and everyone involved. And that means that we don't necessarily need to go back into the past and dig stuff up if it's not impacting our present. So if we don't have a limiting belief or a situation that's causing us distress in the present, there's no need to go back and say, I wonder how my childhood was messed up, and see if I can make it even better. We don't need to do that, because there are many, many ways where our resilience as human beings just naturally does that healing for us. And so what Christine and I are talking about is not going back and digging up the skeletons in the closet, if you will. This is looking at, how am I being impacted in my present by things that may have happened in the past? And so if you're experiencing anxiety or depression or difficult mental states or limiting beliefs or fears, all of these things that are holding you back in some way in the present moment, that's typically a sign that it's time to go ahead and come in and do that inner work. But we don't want to take, like Christine said, the present and transport it back into the past. We don't want you to be having flashbacks or panic attacks or transporting yourself back to the event. We want to create a safe container where we can get curious about, where is this coming from and how can we heal it? And this is so important. And it's actually something that you'll see if you go through therapy, particularly in alternative therapies like EMDR, where there's this concept of integrating your inner child with yourself. And often what you'll see is that there will be this image or this depiction of your inner child at whatever age it was where this wound occurred. And then there's you now as an adult, and you're kind of looking at each other. And the goal is to be able to allow that little girl or boy, or however you identify, to grow up and age so that they can reintegrate and meet you where you are now. So part of that process is going back and holding your inner child's hand and telling them that it's safe, but it's always with the goal that that child will feel safe enough to come out of where they've been stuck and begin that aging and developing process, so they can eventually fully integrate back into you now, and you can be whole and present in this now moment, knowing that you are safe and healed and loved and okay.
Yes, yes. And so when we do this work, just know that Izzy and I are both trauma-informed Reiki coaches. And that just means that we have experience and training to specifically help identify and recognize when trauma is coming up, so that we can then refer you to the appropriate practitioner who are trauma trained. Okay. So with this work, what we like to do, instead of diving back into the skeletons in the closet, we really instead like to go recognizing where the limiting beliefs are and working backwards from there and going, what primary core fundamental limiting belief do we hold, and where did it come from? And we get curious and explore, and instead of judging our past, just getting curious about, that's interesting. And when we come from this perspective, we're allowing whatever needs to kind of bubble to the surface, come to the surface, rather than go, marching in the past and kind of digging. Because I've definitely had many students over the years that are like, all right, feel like I worked through a lot. Let's go looking for something. I go, no. Just enjoy the peace, enjoy the serenity while you have it. And when spirit is ready, they will offer you the next phase of your healing. They'll bring up and bring it forward. So we don't, if you have blacked out memories, that doesn't mean we need to go do a, hypnotherapy session to kind of uncover it. There's a reason that our subconscious has blacked that out. And we want to allow our healing process to be organic and flow to whatever needs to be healed next, rather than forcing anything.
Yeah. And I think it's so important to what you said about enjoying where you are in the present, because oftentimes what we find is if we've experienced traumatic things in childhood, we get used to this sense of chaos. We get used to there always being something wrong, something happening, something that we need to protect ourselves from. And so as adults, that can be reflected as feeling really uncomfortable when things are stable, or when there's not really anything happening, when there's a routine, or when there's peace, and when things are calm in your life. It can actually trigger some of those anxious feelings, because as a child, you learned that calm isn't safe. It meant that something bad was about to happen. And so as an adult, part of the healing work is learning to be calm and present when things in your life are calm and stable, and allowing yourself to relearn that it's okay to be okay, right? Like we hear a lot about it's okay to not be okay. But another really important element of your healing journey is relearning that it's okay to be okay, and to know when it's time to rest and enjoy how far you've come in all of the work that you've done. Because like you said, it's going to unfold at the perfect time. Spirit is going to lead you to where you need to be. Your soul is going to unveil the things that need to be learned exactly when they need to learn them. And so your job is to be fully present with whatever's happening in your life, whether you're in that full-fledged, really deep healing moment, or you're learning how to enjoy the peace and presence of just being okay.
Which leads to a really common limiting belief of there's always something bad that's going to happen next. If things are going good, when's the next shoe going to fall? Like that's a really common one. And part of it is that we have evolution to thank for this one, that we have spent generation after generation after generation of trauma and war and plagues and all of these things that always says, don't enjoy the peace. You can't be happy because there's always going to be something bad that's going to happen next. So not only does this come from our childhood wounds, this could be very much coming from history, ecologically in our bodies, how we're responding to the times. And we are in a really blessed time that we can find pockets of peace and serenity and joy, and to appreciate that without the fear of something that's going to mess it up. And so how can we slow down and just going, all is well, all is well. And accepting that and knowing that you're safe to be there. So just recognizing, are you getting triggered? Just having moments of serenity and knowing that you're worthy of that too. You're worthy of that too.
Yes. And this has actually been, obviously, Christine and I are really open about our personal experiences. And this particular limiting belief is one that I'm currently working through, because I've had the past, I would say probably 3 or 4 years of my life have been a lot of healing and a lot of chaos as a result of, and partially causing that healing. And so the past 3 or 4 months have actually been really calm. I have a routine. I do the same thing every morning. I go to the library every Thursday. Like I have started to have this stability and this routine. And I found myself in the quiet moments going, okay, something's about to happen. Something's about to go wrong. I must be forgetting something. I'm not being vigilant enough. All of these thoughts that kind of creep up in the quiet moments. And that can even come across too, is this is one that's really interesting, is boredom. If you start to feel bored, it can actually be your subconscious mind saying something's not wrong. We need to make something be wrong. We need to make there be a problem so we can be working on fixing it. And so that's a really fascinating way that limiting beliefs from your childhood can appear in your adulthood. And it's also a fantastic example of how sneaky your subconscious mind can be, because it's going to do whatever it can to keep you safe and to keep you happy, however that looks for it. And so again, realizing that your definition or your subconscious mind's definition of safe and happy depends on what you experienced as a child. And so a lot of times, if we did have chaotic, traumatic childhoods, the subconscious mind has decided that we are safe when chaotic things are happening, because then we have the ability to try and go in and control it and fix it and do these things, and we're being proactive. And so then the subconscious mind says, if you're not being proactive, then you're just being lazy and you're being selfish and you're in danger. And so it's fascinating to watch how these thoughts and these patterns from your childhood start to appear in your adult life.
Yeah. And I love kind of connecting this even to the love languages, because you see them reflect in your limiting beliefs. So like, for example, as much as I've tried to finagle my love language, it very much is acts of service. And when I am really stressed out, when I am triggered, my response is to do as many things as possible, to the point where I won't slow down. Like, I will do everything for everyone else, and I will stay completely busy, because that's my trauma response. And why is that? Because when I was growing up, I was made to feel that I was a burden. And the way to combat feeling like a burden is to help and fix and clean and do all of the things for everyone else, because then I'm not a burden anymore. I'm a helper, right? And so I had an older sister who had some developmental difficulties. And in that, I kind of was always pushed aside. I was also the middle child with significant middle child syndrome. So I always was the one that didn't get a lot of attention. I was the one who was just fine. And so I could be kind of pushed aside. But what that led to was feeling like, well, I must be a burden, or no one cares about me. So how can I get attention? I can get attention by being a perfectionist. I can get attention by doing the dishes. I can get attention by helping clean the house or taking care of my younger brother or whatever it was. Right. So I was a go, 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 do. Everything has to be perfect, because then maybe then someone will notice me. Right. And so I can see it in my life today. Like, I'll even, to the point of when I'm super stressed out, I'll like stop eating. I'll cook for everyone else, but I will self-sabotage, right? Like, I will like put myself absolutely last. So if I'm overdoing it for my family, it's usually a very significant sign that I'm actually stressed out. Do you see how that works?
Yes. And it's love languages are fascinating when we start to look at our childhood as well, because I've always had this theory that I've seen play out in my own lives and in clients and students, etc., is what Christine's talking about is your giving love language, right? Like how you show it to others. But your receptive love language is also just as fascinating, because if a lot of times what happens is the way that you receive love now is often a reflection of what you were lacking as a child. And so, for example, my mother was very much an acts of service mom. Like, if I had a problem, so when I was 15, I got really, really sick, and I was sick for probably 3 or 4 years. And in that time, what I really needed was somebody to comfort me and tell me that you're doing okay and you're going to be okay and all of these things. But my mom's not a words of affirmation person. She's just not. She doesn't express her love through positive affirmations. She expressed her love by doing research on what it could be, or alternative medicines that I could take to help me, like doing all of this looking and digging and research that she would bring to me and say, look, here are some things that I found, which to me, as a words of affirmation person, I interpreted as there's something broken that we need to fix, not you're okay as you are and I love you. And that's not what she was saying, but as a words of affirmation person, that's what I took it as. And so it's really fascinating if you start to look at, how do you receive love? What is your receptive love language? And is that reflected in what you felt like you wanted as a child, but didn't necessarily receive? And then we get into this really interesting phase that comes along with whether it's love languages or limiting beliefs or anything that we're talking about when we're discussing inner child healing. It starts to become this question of at what point is it still a trauma response? And at what point is it just part of my personality? And this is something that I don't think gets discussed ever. And it's something that needs to be discussed, because what ends up happening is if you go down this road, especially if you're in this sphere, if you're listening to this video, you're probably in that space where you do so much healing that eventually you start to notice that every single thought you have could be defined as a limiting belief. Every single feeling you have could be defined as the result of an experience you had as a child. And so it starts to become this question of, can you be comfortable being who you are, even if who you are still has remnants of what you experienced in your childhood? Because the fact of it is that our personalities as human beings are shaped by our childhood. Our energy, our soul's essence isn't. Our soul's essence is constant and eternal and all that is. But how that is reflected in our humanity, in our human personality, it is shaped by our childhood and by our early experiences. And so there comes a point when, just like we were talking earlier about don't go digging for things that aren't ready to be brought up, there also comes a point where we have to look at, can I be okay being who I am? And is it a limiting belief because it's harming me? Or is it part of my personality because it's just who I am and it's allowing me to express myself in this world? Because it's a really fine line. And it's something that I've seen a lot of people kind of fall down the rabbit hole of what I call forever healing. Because as humans, we are always healing. We're always learning. We're always evolving. But there's a difference between being open to your evolution as a person and trying to go back and fix the things that you perceive as broken because you're never enough, which leads us to another really common limiting belief that can stem from our childhood, which is I'm not enough or I'm not worthy to be loved.
Yeah. Yeah. And so if you guys need a tangible like example of this, so my love language is acts of service. And what I love doing for my family is cooking. Like, I love it. I'm not trauma responding. I'm not limiting believing myself. I love going to the garden and harvesting food, coming home and making beautiful meals or canning or whatever. Like, it gives me such profound joy and a sense of peace, knowing that I'm providing for my family in this way. So just because I recognize that I'm an acts of service person, both for the receiving, if people want to make me happy, you don't need to buy me a gift. You don't need to tell me you love me. You do not need to give me a hug. Just go do something for me and I will think that you love me, right? So that's really, and recognizing our family dynamics. Like I love looking at the love language, because when we can understand not only ourselves, but we understand our partners and our children and our parents, then you can kind of meet them where they're at. And like my family knows that I'm not a touchy, like I don't need a hug, but I also recognize my children really need hugs. My husband needs hugs and affection and touch, right? So I can then go, okay, I can do this because it's part of their support. And let's not lead them down the road of having significant childhood wounds later on because I didn't meet them where they were at, right? So it's this very interesting thing of how can I recognize where I am, recognize who I was in my past, recognize how is that blending in with my everyday life, and am I responding from something that happened in the past, or is this who I am? And am I acting out of subconscious contraction of fear, or am I responding out of love and peace and joy?
Yes.
And that expansion.
Yes. And I think that's the biggest thing when we're talking about limiting beliefs versus personality or childhood wounds versus where you are now, is it's that distinction between, am I acting because I am trying to keep myself safe and I'm acting out of fear, so that reactivity, or am I acting out of a place of genuine love and openness and expansion, just being present in the moment, so that activity of being able to just be present and respond authentically versus being pulled into the past and feeling that fear, feeling that need to keep yourself safe is really that if you're struggling to find that line between, is this a wound that needs to be healed, or is this a quirk that I have, or a characteristic of my personality that is ready to be loved and accepted, is looking at, is it coming from a place of fear, or is it coming from a place of freedom? And then that's a really easy, really simple test to see, does this need more attention, or does this just need my acceptance?
Yeah. Yeah. So when we start recognizing our limiting beliefs, I'm unlovable, I'm unworthy, I'm a burden, whatever it may be for you, oftentimes we can start to recognize what our primary core limiting belief is by recognizing our thought patterns. Our inner critics are that inner voice that is telling you things. We need to start observing it. So we are running 95% on our subconscious thoughts. And 5% is conscious. 5% is going through that conscious filter. And when we slow down to go, I'm observing my own thought processes, and perhaps you're writing them down. Perhaps you're writing them down and noticing what activity they go with. Every time I do the dishes, every time I drive to work, every time, whatever it is, recognizing what thoughts come up when, and almost tally marking them. Well, I had this like, oh, I'm so ugly, or I'm not good enough, or whatever it is. And you make a tally of it. And then let's just focus on the main one. Because usually when we focus on the main one, we can kind of go, okay, what's underneath that? Oftentimes like, oh, I'm so ugly isn't actually I'm so ugly. There's something underneath that says I'm unlovable, or I'm inherently flawed, right? And that's the core limiting belief. So you can start recognizing how your inner critic is feeding you to hold you in this stagnant pattern and loop to keep you the same. It doesn't, our subconscious has no drive to heal. It has no drive of its own to want to be better, because it wants you to stay the same. So you have your subconscious that wants to run on autopilot, that doesn't like doing anything new and doesn't want to go outside of your comfort zone. Why? Because it knows that you will survive the day if you don't change anything. If you do exactly what you did yesterday and all the days previous, you will survive. And that's its main objective. And so the challenge is once we allow our conscious mind, that 5% who's like, I have willpower, we want to use that 5% just to get curious and observe and see what your subconscious is talking about. And when you can start there, you can start also feeling into, who's that voice? Who does it match from my past? Was it my mom? Was it my dad? Was it my uncle? Was it my preschool teacher? Was it my art teacher from third grade? Like, just observe who it's from. So we're not judging ourselves. We're just getting curious and going, this is interesting. So that's step one.
Absolutely. And it's from there, you can really start to look at that question of who is this voice is fascinating, because often it starts to unveil a little bit more of the story of why you have that limiting belief. And then the next step for me is really defining what's the word that your limiting belief is focused around. So for example, for a tangible example here, I had this really powerful, really poignant belief that I was selfish. And to Christine's point of looking at when is it showing up for you, it would be every night when I sat down to eat dinner, I would read a book, or I would turn on the TV and watch an episode of Seinfeld because it's such a good show, or whatever it is. And I would sit and I would relax. And as soon as I relaxed, I wasn't working, I wasn't taking care of someone else, I wasn't thinking about what needed to be done. I was just being present in myself. Immediately that dialogue would come in about, I'm selfish, I am taking resources from other people, I am not being grateful for what I have, all of these voices in my head. And so eventually I really sat down and I was like, okay, I have this situation where I'm taking care of myself and I'm not worrying about anyone or anything else other than just being present and taking care of myself, literally eating food to fuel my body. And the belief is I am selfish. That's great, but now what do we do with it? And so that next step is looking at what's the key word there. In mine, it was selfish. Looking at what does selfish actually mean to you? And the difference here is looking at how is it defined in your belief. So in my belief, selfish was taking care of myself at the expense of another person. When I look at how I want it to be defined or how it's actually defined, it is taking care of yourself at the expense of another person, but it's knowingly doing so. It's doing so in spite of the other person. And when I could look at that, when I could actually take a step back and dissect what that word meant for me, then I could look at, are my actions actually harming someone? Is me sitting down to eat dinner actually harming someone? No, it's not. And so therefore, by my own mind's definition, I'm not being selfish. And that's kind of step one for starting to unravel the limiting belief is you have that first portion of healing, which is becoming aware and getting curious. And then you have that second portion, which is starting to unravel it and starting to look at, is this actually true? Do I know for 100% certain that this is true? And that can look like defining the word. That can look like, have I ever had anybody actually tell me something that aligns with this limiting belief explicitly? Have I ever seen evidence of this in my life? For example, if you're lazy, have you ever had an experience that told you you were lazy? And if the answer is yes, was it actually telling you you were lazy? Or is that what you took from it to protect yourself? And so really getting curious about why is it here and is this true starts to untangle all of those knots. And then we can start looking at tools and techniques that we can use to take that awareness and that understanding and move it into a place of healing.
Yes. Okay. So just to recap, for healing our limiting beliefs around our inner child, when we work with our inner child, first step is to have awareness. Awareness is always going to be the first step of healing, to be recognizing that inner voice, that inner critic. And then step two is to really going, is this true? To recognizing, is that inner critic really actually telling you something that's authentically true? Oftentimes the answer is no, no, it's not, right? And so then step three is going, how can I radically love myself to show myself that I'm worthy of healing? And that right there is going to go up a lot, combat a lot of those limiting beliefs, because if I say I am worthy of radical self-care, you're already pushing that, that dictator in your head that says that you're not. Going that I am inherently worthy because I am human and I'm on this planet at this time. That means I am worthy. I'm worthy to take care of myself and I'm worthy to start my healing journey. And the way we can do this is really going to visit our inner child in our mind's eye, allowing that inner child to come forward and asking her or him or them, what do they need? What do they need right now? Do they need a hug? Do they need food? Do they need to play? What would they need? And so oftentimes when we are working with our clients around the inner child, we're inviting them to bring forward into the present day their inner child, recognizing what age they are. Oftentimes the age that they show up as is who needs the healing. That time period needed the healing the most, or who's ready for healing the most at this current juncture in your healing journey. So we're recognizing their age, and we're also recognizing what do they enjoy the most at that age. What was something joyful that they wanted to experience and they didn't get enough of? So for example, if your inner child is like, I want a warm, cozy blanket and I want my coloring book, then your job is to be like, yes, we can do that. Here's the big warm, cozy blanket. Here's color crayons or markers or colored pencils and a coloring book. Oftentimes, these small acts of meeting your inner child where they're at and what they desire is going to tell your inner child that they are worthy of love, they're worthy of that attention, and they're worthy of having their needs met. Such a beautiful and simple solution. And for us as adults to make time for that is a huge step in radical self-care. Even taking 5 minutes to wrap up in a blanket and color in the coloring book is saying that your inner child is worthy of that love, that time, and that presence.
And a lot of times what you might find is that you might start wondering, like, what good is this going to do? Or this seems so childish to wrap up in a blanket and start coloring, all of these thoughts. And so noticing, are those thoughts actually how you feel, or are those thoughts things that your subconscious mind is throwing up to keep you from going back to a time that was painful? Because that can often happen. It's not that these things are childish. It's not that they're selfish. It's not that they're silly or stupid or whatever your subconscious mind is telling you. It's that they were a time when you were vulnerable, and your subconscious mind has kept you safe by essentially pretending that they didn't happen. And so when we look back and we acknowledge them, it's hard. It's difficult work that you guys are doing. And so it's important in that act of radical self-love to acknowledge that, to acknowledge all of the healing that you're doing, the depths to which you are diving in your own personal experience and subconscious, because it's difficult and it's intense, but the other side is so beautiful and free that it's absolutely worth it.
Yeah. Yes. Yes. So that really is a beautiful step to take, just recognizing what your inner child wants and meeting that need. That in of itself is telling your inner child that they are worthy of having their needs met. So that is your step one homework. You want to heal your inner child? That's it. Bring in the awareness, recognize what is the limiting belief true, and then going, who is my inner child, and what do they need? How can I support them and playing there? So there isn't a huge demand to go back to the trauma. We don't need to do that. I had a client that I was working with, and her inner child was very much the bully. She was the bully in her elementary school, middle school, and so on. And so we needed to visit her, that inner child bully, of going, where were your needs not met? How can we love on you to get all of your needs met so that you will stop being so angry and forceful and all of these things? And huge shifts happen. Her inner child wanted the easy bake oven. Her inner child wanted a white flowy nightgown. And after the session, at the end of the session, I was like, okay, your homework is to go find those things. Go find the easy bake oven, go find the white flowy, countryside nightgown. And she literally left the session and went to a thrift store and found those items, like the easy bake oven in the original packaging, ready to be purchased. And I'm like, the divine is so wanting you to do this work. It's going to meet you right where you're at. It's so, this can be such easy healing, like easy assignments, like none of it's really hard. It's about you making the time for it. You saying that, yeah, I've got 10 minutes a day to go hang out with my inner child. And that right there, just committing to 10 minutes a day can be really hard for people who are resisting their healing work and who are putting themselves last. Right. And so we're going, can you take 5 minutes, 10 minutes a day to take care of yourself? I even tell students, like, they're like, how am I supposed to meditate or practice Reiki? Right? I can't take all the time to this. I'm like, you can intend to do Reiki during your sleep. You can take 5 minutes and take 5 minutes in the morning and set yourself up for a positive day just by setting everything in line. And notice your whole life will start to shift and change when you make these small self-care adjustments, knowing that you are worthy of them.
Absolutely. And even if that feels like a lot, another option, another way to look at this is, can you invite your inner child to be with you throughout the day? I remember when I was first diving into inner child healing, I was dealing with really, really intense social phobia. And so anytime I was out, whether it was the supermarket or the coffee shop or the bank or the grocery store or wherever it was, I would have this immense anxiety. And what you can do if you're starting to have that emotional response is you can go into yourself. You can take a moment and say, what is it that's hurting right now? Who is it in me that's hurting or scared? And oftentimes you will find that inner child at a certain age from a certain circumstance who's telling you that this situation you're about to walk into is scary. And what that inner child needs isn't you to say, it shouldn't be scary, I'm going to do it anyway. What your inner child needs is, let me pick you up, let me hold your hand, and we'll do it together. Because you now can be the adult that your inner child needed at the time. And that is so incredibly powerful that even if you're just inviting your inner child to be with you in that moment. I remember I used to walk around the supermarket with my hand like this because I was visualizing that I was holding little me's hand. And even just that small act of showing her, being the adult that she needed at the time, to show her that, look, we're okay. We can do this together. No one's going to hurt us. No one's going to say anything to us. We're just going to go in the supermarket, get our carrots, and leave, and we'll be okay. And it was so powerful because, again, you can be that adult, you can be that parent, that teacher, that guardian, whatever that your inner child needed most. And so if spending 10 minutes a day coloring or playing or singing or whatever it is isn't resonating for you, think about, where are the circumstances where my inner child is feeling wounded or scared or hurt or tired or sad or not loved? And how can I bring him or her into the present moment and comfort her the way that she needed or he needed comforted then? Can I allow them to feel that safety, that love, that protection, so that they can explore the situation and realize that, oh, we are okay? Even if that's, when you're in a meeting with your boss, if you're visualizing that you're holding little you and she or he or they are just watching and noticing what's happening, knowing that you're protecting them can be so incredibly healing. Because, again, we talk about this all the time. Everything's happening now. Everything in time and space is all happening now because this perception of time, this landscape of time, only exists in 3D. And so if we look at when we're taking those moments to play with our inner child or interact with our inner child, we are actually on an energetic level reaching back into the past and comforting them when they needed it most. And even just taking a minute to sit with that and thinking about whichever circumstance is coming to mind when you think about when your inner child needed healing, and thinking about, if you now had been able to comfort them in that moment, how amazing that would have been. And realizing that when you're doing the work in the present moment, that's exactly what you're doing.
Yeah, absolutely. So as you're listening to this, just noticing what your inner child needs and desires, what your inner child would like, whether it's the piece of chocolate cake or a snuggle with a movie, like just recognizing, because every single one of us has some childhood wounds. There is no way to escape your childhood without them. And I'll give you an example of one that I'm sure almost everyone can relate to. Okay, so you're getting ready to head out the door. Your mom says, go get in the car. We've got to go. We're running late. And you go outside, and instead of getting in the car, you go get on your bike and you ride your bike for a minute, and you fall off. You skin your knee, you're crying. You're in pain. And your mom comes out, or your dad comes out, whoever it is, and says, I thought I told you to get in the car. How dare you ignore what I said? Let's go. Get out now. And they're just shouting and pushing you along, because guess what? We're human. We're parents. Like, so many of us are parents on this call. Like, we do this. Like, it's just, we're human. But the child needed a hug. The child needed time. The child needed space. The child needed to know that it was going to be all okay. And so now that child might carry forward with them that I'm a burden, or I'm not worthy of taking an extra minute to calm me down, or whatever it may be. But it was just a pretty normal childhood instance. And we all have them. Little things that happened that can add up. And as our subconscious develops, and we go back to how does the subconscious develop from ages 0 to 7? Our subconscious is in development. There is no conscious filter yet. Everything is absorbed into the subconscious at that time. So anything that you're told, anything that you hear, you take as valid and true and you accept it. There is no filter yet. It's not until about age 8 that the consciousness starts going, I wonder if that's true. I wonder if that's right or wrong. It doesn't get curious and doesn't start having the logical thought process until around 8 years old. And so anything that you're told before the age of 7, you've just accepted it. So if someone tells you you're a bad artist, or if someone tells you you're a slow eater, or someone tells you that you're a loud chewer, or whatever it is, you just go, oh, that must be 100% true. And now I believe it. It's somewhere buried in my subconscious, and it will always be that inner critic voice in my head until we say, no, I hear you. I see you. You're not valid. I'm willing to do the healing work to heal the inner child. And I'm ready to hit the unsubscribe button. No longer will I allow my brain to feed me this negative self-talk. There's a choice that can be had once you do the healing work, so that when it bubbles to the surface, you go, oh, wait a second. I remember that came from when I was 8 years old, and I don't have to listen to that anymore. I can hit the unsubscribe button. No longer do I need to listen to my grandmother's voice in my head or my father's voice in my head. They're not dictating who I am right now. I am. And so we can reassure the mind that no, they don't have to continue to live like this. You can say, nope, quiet, get in the back seat. I'm driving now. My conscious mind is making the effort to move forward. And so instead of looking back, we choose to be in the present and to look forward.
Yes. And it's so powerful when we're answering that question of how do I heal my inner child? How can I help my inner child integrate into who I am now? How can I be this whole person in the present? Is really understanding that you have the ability to take your power back now. Because when we're children, whether it was what some people would qualify as an extreme traumatic event, or it was an ordinary childhood experience that was painful to you in your perspective, we learned that we did not have the power or the control over the situation. We learned that the adults were the ones who told us how the world worked and took care of us and told us when we were right and told us when we were wrong. And we didn't have the power. We just had to be there. Especially if you grew up in the era of, you should be seen and not heard and all of these things before things like gentle parenting, etc., were a thing. We're very much taught that as children, we do not have the power. Right? I remember a lot of times when I was growing up, I have always called myself a why person. I've always wanted to know why things are the way we are, why we do things the way we do, even when I was really young. And I would always ask my mom if she would tell me to do something, I'd always say why. Not because I was trying to be rude, but because I was just genuinely curious. Why do we have to do that? And I remember one of the most common responses I would get is because I said so, or because I'm the adult and you're the child and you have to do as you're told. And so you learn from a very young age that you don't have the power. You have to do as the world tells you to do. And so a really powerful element of answering that question, how do I heal my inner child, is reminding yourself that now as an adult, you do have that power. You do have that ability to choose what you want your life to look like, when you want to do things, how you want to do them, who you want to be. You have that ability and that power and that choice to take back those reins, that control, if you will, of your life and choose consciously. Instead of being told what to do by everyone else, you can step into your power and say, no, this is my life. I am my own person, and I can choose what happens next. And even just that realization that you have the power now, whereas in your childhood you didn't, that in and of itself can be incredibly healing, because it reminds you that you're not there anymore. You're not that young child who was feeling hurt or unloved or unworthy or whatever it is. You are a full-grown adult who has handled life beautifully and to the best of your abilities. You've made your own decisions. You found friends or partners or a job or a house or a cat or whatever it is. And if you can step back and take a minute to look at how much you have accomplished, how many choices you have made for yourself that have turned out beautifully, your inner child can realize we're not wounded anymore. We're not at the whim of other people anymore. We have that power and we have that ability and we have that choice. And it's time that we feel worthy enough to step into it.
Yes, you are worthy to step into it. And so my question for you now is, what can you do today, or what can you do this week that's going to help support your inner child? What's a joyful action you can take to recognize the worth of your inner child and their voice, to help meet them where they're at? And if we can do just one thing once a day, or one thing every few days, or even once a week, of just taking that moment to time out and pause and show up for them, you watch your limiting beliefs start to just dissolve. They will just fall away the more we support our inner child with where they're at and meeting their needs.
Absolutely. So with all of that said, we would love to know what questions you have, how you've supported your inner child, what your experiences with healing your inner child have been. So you can give us a message on Facebook. You can join the Reiki Cafe community group and leave your comments there. Share your ideas. We want to see you and hear you exactly as you are now, knowing that you are worthy to be seen and be heard. You can even send us an email at Isabel@Reiki Cafe University or admin@ReikiCafeUniversity.com, and you'll reach Christine and myself, and we can share in this healing together, because we truly do find healing when we allow ourselves to be seen and heard, and when we have that connection with our community. So know that Reiki Cafe is your community. It is your safe space for healing, and we are so incredibly grateful that you have joined with us today.
Absolutely. So know that if you would like to do an inner child healing session, Izzy and I are available to provide those. So we'll send the link out here in the chat, and also place it in the replays on the show notes and in the Reiki Cafe Community Facebook group. So if you are interested in doing a deep dive and giving yourself that 90 minutes of deep self-care, we're able to support you there. Know too that if you are interested in doing some further chakra work, this is very much sacral chakra healing work, and it's part of all of our signature programs to do this healing part, because it's significant. Like it's so powerful. Like, people worry so much about their imposter syndrome and their limiting beliefs and the things that are getting away from being who they are, who they want to be, the business owner, the mother, the wife, the whoever it is, and their limiting beliefs are limiting them, right? And so when we do this work, things can really start shaking up. It allows you to know that you're worthy to be the grandest version of who you are, and whatever that looks like. So take the time to know that you're worthy of it. Know that on Reiki Cafe University.com, you can find our chakra flow one-on-one course. It's a self-paced course that will really help you do some of this chakra work. And we're here to support you. So feel into that. Know that the Reiki and Manifesting Abundance course really gets into the limiting beliefs and how to break those down, and really work on the money mindset. So many of us have that, have that issue where it's like, I don't have enough. and knowing that that too is a limiting belief.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So once again, thank you all so much for joining with us today, for committing to yourself and your healing and being present for who you are here and now and being willing to do that work. So if you have questions, if you have comments, if you want to share, know that we are here to support you. And like Christine said, if you want to work with us one-on-one, we would be more than happy to support you in that way. And in the meantime, we hope to see you in the Reiki Cafe Community Facebook group. And I hope you all have a wonderful, wonderful day.
Lots of love. Take care, everyone.